When you suffer a stroke, you see life differently. You realize how fragile every breath is, how quickly strength can disappear. I thought my family would protect me when I was at my weakest. I thought my son, my only child, would stand by me the way I once stood by him through every scraped knee, every heartbreak, every failure. But when I came home from the hospital, still trembling, still learning how to hold a spoon without dropping it, my son looked me in the eye and said words I never thought I would hear. "Mom, you belong in a nursing home. You can't handle life on your own anymore." My heart cracked that day, not just because of my stroke, but because of his betrayal. But what my son forgot was who I really was. I wasn't just his fragile mother. I was the woman who built, managed, and owned the business he thought was his. And while he planned to throw me away, I was already planning a revenge he would never see coming. My name is Margaret Walker. I'm 79 years old, and this is the story of how my son's betrayal nearly broke me, but instead, it gave me the strength to take back everything. The morning of my stroke began like any other. The sun filtered weakly through the curtains of my kitchen, catching on the steam of my coffee. I had been folding laundry, David's old baseball shirts, tucked away though he hadn't touched them in years, when suddenly the world tilted sideways. It started with my hand. The basket slipped from my grip, clothes spilling across the floor. I bent to pick them up, but my legs betrayed me. My chest tightened, my breath caught, and then the world was swallowed in a gray haze. When I woke, it was in a hospital bed, the beeping of machines marking time I couldn't feel. My head throbbed, my mouth tasted of metal, and my left arm was heavy, numb, like it no longer belonged to me. A nurse leaned over. "Mrs. Walker, you had a stroke. But you're stable now. You'll need therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. It's going to take time." Time. That was the word that stuck. Time to heal, time to rebuild, time to fight against my own body. I remember asking for David, my son. He arrived later that afternoon, his tie loosened, his phone still buzzing in his pocket. He kissed my forehead, his expression a mix of worry and impatience. "Mom, you scared me," he said, though his eyes kept darting to the phone. "You can't keep pushing yourself like this." "I was just folding laundry," I whispered, my voice slurred. "That's what I mean," he said firmly. "You shouldn't be living alone anymore." I thought he meant it with love. I thought he was afraid for me. I didn't yet realize it was the first warning of what was to come. The weeks after were a blur of doctors and therapists. My speech improved, slowly, though my hand still shook when I tried to hold a fork. My legs, once sturdy, faltered after only a few steps. I hated the weakness. I hated needing help. But I was grateful too. David took me home from the hospital. He set up a bed downstairs so I wouldn't have to climb the stairs. He brought me soup, water, my medications. I thought, he's here for me. But gratitude is a fragile thing. And illusions break quickly. One night, I sat at the table, carefully lifting a spoonful of soup to my lips. My hand trembled. The broth spilled onto the tablecloth. I sighed, embarrassed. David set down his fork. "Mom," he said flatly, "you can't keep living like this." I looked up at him, startled. "I'm trying." The therapist said I'm improving. "You're not improving fast enough," he interrupted. "You belong in a nursing home." The words landed like stones on my chest. "A nursing home?" My voice cracked. "Yes," he said, his expression hard, businesslike. "They'll take better care of you than I can. You can't cook, you can't drive, you can't even hold a spoon. You'll be safer there." I stared at him, my son, the boy I raised through long nights, through sickness, through heartbreak. My son, who used to cry when he scraped his knee, who I rocked in my arms until the pain eased. Now he wanted me gone. I swallowed hard, my throat aching. "David. I just need more time." He shook his head. "I don't have time. The business needs me. My family needs me. You'll only slow us down if you stay here." My breath caught. Slow us down. That was how he saw me now, not as his mother, but as a burden. I went to bed that night with tears on my pillow. The house was silent, but inside me, a storm raged. It wasn't just the stroke that had weakened me, it was his words. I felt discarded, like an old coat shoved into the back of a closet. But as I stared at the ceiling, I I remembered something David had forgotten. The business he called his, the one he poured his hours and energy into, wasn't his at all. It was mine. My late husband, Harold, and I had built it from nothing. We had started with a single delivery truck, just the two of us, and grown it into a company that supported dozens of employees. When Harold died, I became the sole owner. When David grew older, I let him run it. He had ideas, energy, ambition. I gave him the reins. But I never gave up ownership. The papers were still in my name. And as I lay there in the dark, my tears drying on my cheeks, I whispered to myself, if he wants me gone, he'll learn the cost of forgetting who gave him everything. The days after, I began watching him more closely. I noticed how he came home later, his tie loose, his eyes distracted. He barely spoke to me unless it was about my therapy appointments, or about the nursing home brochures he conveniently left on the table. One morning, I woke to find a glossy folder on my nightstand. A smiling elderly couple on the cover. Comfort living, where care meets luxury. I turned it over in my hands, my fingers trembling, not just from weakness, but from rage. He hadn't even asked me. He had decided already. At breakfast, I confronted him. Did you put this in my room? He didn't even look ashamed. Yes. You need to start thinking seriously about your options. My option, I said firmly, is to heal in my own home. His jaw tightened. That's not realistic, Mom. I slammed my spoon down, broth splashing onto the tablecloth. My voice shook, but my eyes burned with fire. What's not realistic is you thinking you can decide my life for me. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time, I saw not a son, but a man who had forgotten his roots. I said nothing more, but inside me, a quiet, cold determination settled. He thought my stroke had broken me. He thought he could strip me of dignity and control. But he had no idea the strength a mother could summon when betrayed by her own child. He wanted me in a nursing home? No. I was going to remind him exactly who built the foundation under his feet. And when I was done, he wouldn't just regret his words, he would feel the sting of losing everything he took for granted. The morning after our argument, I watched David more carefully. I noticed things I hadn't before, or perhaps I hadn't wanted to. He wasn't just impatient with me. He was distracted, agitated, like a man carrying secrets. His phone buzzed constantly, and he never let it out of his hand. When I asked how the business was doing, he brushed me off. Fine, Mom. Don't worry about it. But his voice was clipped, his jaw tight. I had owned and managed that company for decades. I knew when someone was hiding something. That week, as I worked slowly with my therapist on simple exercises, lifting spoons, walking a few careful steps, I also worked on something else. I started keeping a notebook by my bed. Each night, I wrote what I saw, David's late arrivals, his hushed phone calls, the way he tossed aside bills unopened. It wasn't long before I began piecing the truth together. One afternoon, while David was out, the mail arrived. A thick envelope sat on the pile, the company's logo stamped at the corner. I hesitated, then picked it up, my fingers trembling. Inside were unpaid invoices and a letter from the bank. The words leapt out at me, overdue, penalties, at risk. I sat there at the kitchen table, the papers spread before me, my chest tightening. The business wasn't thriving. It was drowning. And suddenly, everything clicked. David didn't want me in a nursing home just because I was weak. He wanted me gone because he needed freedom. He wanted to take full control of the business without my presence or oversight. He thought I was too frail to notice. Too broken to fight. But I noticed. And I would fight. That evening, I asked him gently, "Is everything all right at the company?" He froze for half a second, just enough for me to see the truth in his eyes, before forcing a smile. "Everything's fine, Mom. Don't stress about it. Focus on your health." Focus on my health. As if I were a child to be placated, distracted. I nodded and said nothing. But in my mind, I began to plan. The next day while he was out, I called an old friend, Robert Jenkins, the lawyer who had helped Harold and me draft the trust and business papers years ago. His voice was warm, steady. "Margaret, it's been too long," he said. "How are you holding up?" "I had a stroke," I admitted, my voice trembling. "But I'm recovering. I need your help, Robert." Quietly. He hesitated, concern in his tone. What's going on? My son wants to put me in a nursing home, I said bitterly. And I believe he's running the business into the ground. I want to know exactly where we stand. Robert didn't hesitate after that. I'll pull the records. We'll meet soon. You leave the digging to me. When I hung up, I felt lighter, stronger. For the first time since my stroke, I wasn't just surviving, I was fighting back. That week, my suspicion grew. At dinner one evening, David tossed a set of glossy brochures onto the table. Look, Mom. These places are perfect. Clean, safe, professional. You'll have nurses around you all the time. I pushed the papers aside. I'm not going anywhere. He leaned forward, frustration tightening his features. Mom, be reasonable. You can't keep living here alone. What happens if you fall again? What happens if I'm not around? I met his gaze calmly. I managed after your father died. I can manage now. His lips pressed into a thin line. This isn't the same. No, I agreed softly. It isn't. Because this time, the danger isn't my health. It's you. He blinked, startled, then forced a laugh. Don't be ridiculous. But his hand tightened around his glass, his knuckles white. I knew I had struck a nerve. The next morning, I found him in the living room, pacing as he spoke into his phone. He didn't hear me come down the stairs. Yes, I'll get her out soon, he muttered. The paperwork will be easier once she's gone. Just give me more time. My heart thudded. Paperwork. Gone. He wasn't just talking about a nursing home. He was talking about me. I stepped back quietly before he could see me, my hands trembling. But inside, a new fire blazed. If he thought my stroke had made me powerless, he was wrong. That afternoon, Robert called me back. His voice was grim. Margaret, I pulled the records. Your son has taken out loans against the company. He's missed payments. If this continues, he could lose everything. I closed my eyes, my worst fears confirmed. Robert, I said, steadying my voice, I want the ownership structure checked. Every paper Harold and I signed. Every clause. I want to know exactly what rights I have. You're still the sole owner, he said firmly. David may run the day-to-day, but nothing can be sold, borrowed against, or transferred without your signature. Relief flooded me. Power still lay in my hands. Then it's time I remind my son who really owns this business, I whispered. But I knew I had to be careful. If I moved too fast, David would see it coming. He might find a way to fight back. So I did what every mother learns to do best. I waited. I pretended weakness. I let him think I was too tired, too frail, too broken to notice. At dinner, I thanked him for taking care of me, even as he pushed another nursing home brochure toward me. I smiled faintly, playing the role he wanted me to play. But at night, in the quiet of my room, I wrote in my notebook. Every lie he told. Every slip of the tongue. Every cruel word. And slowly, piece by piece, I was building my case. One night, as I closed the notebook and slid it under my pillow, I whispered to myself, "You want me gone, David? Fine. But when I go, I'll take everything you think is yours with me." The weeks that followed were like watching a mask slowly peel off. David was no longer trying to hide his impatience. He spoke to me like I was a problem he needed to solve, not a mother he needed to care for. Every day, it was the same. A brochure left on my nightstand. A casual mention of how wonderful the care staff would be. Sometimes, he even dangled the threat of accidents. What if you fall while I'm at work, Mom? Do you really want to put that on me? It cut deep, but I didn't let him see the wound. I sat quietly, nodding, playing the weak-old woman he thought I was. Inside, I was sharpening my blade. One afternoon, while he was at the office, Robert, the lawyer, came by. His hair had gone completely white since I last saw him, but his handshake was still firm, his eyes still clear. "I pulled everything," he said, laying a folder on the kitchen table. "Margaret, you are the sole owner of Walker Logistics. David may be running operations, but legally, he's just an employee. You hold the final word on everything." My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Seeing my name there, owner, Margaret Walker, felt like oxygen after nearly drowning. Robert leaned closer. I also found something else. He's been using company funds for personal expenses. Large withdrawals, entertainment bills, expensive dinners. If an auditor looked at this, it would be trouble. My stomach turned. He wasn't just failing to manage the business. He was bleeding it dry. Robert, I said quietly, don't act yet. Let him think he's winning. I need him to show his true face, not just to me, but to everyone. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. You're stronger than you look. Strength isn't in the body, I said, tapping my temple. It's here. And here. I placed a hand over my chest. When he left, I sat at the table alone, staring at the folder. My stroke had taken some of my independence, yes. But it hadn't taken my mind. And it certainly hadn't taken my will. That evening, David came home late. His tie was loosened, his eyes bloodshot. He walked into the kitchen and dropped a takeout bag on the counter. Dinner, he said flatly, then poured himself a whiskey. I watched him silently as he drank, his hand shaking. He looked less like the ambitious boy I raised and more like a man teetering on the edge of ruin. Rough day? I asked gently. He laughed bitterly. Every day's rough, Mom. You wouldn't understand. Try me, I said softly. He slammed the glass down. You wouldn't get it. The business is suffocating me. Employees whining, clients pulling back. And I have to come home to this. He stopped, his jaw clenching. To what? I asked, my voice cool. He looked at me, guilt flickering in his eyes for only a moment before hardening again. To you. To a house that feels like a hospital. To responsibilities I never asked for. I swallowed, my chest aching, but I didn't break. Instead, I whispered, You think I asked for a stroke? His silence said everything. Later that night, when the house was quiet, I wrote in my notebook, He sees me as baggage. He forgets who built his world. He forgets the business carries my name. The next morning, I started planting seeds. Over breakfast, I said casually, I had a call from Robert Jenkins yesterday. He wants me to update some of my paperwork. Make sure everything's in order. David froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. What paperwork? Oh, just ownership documents. Wills, trusts, the business. I sipped my tea, watching him squirm. It's been a while since I reviewed them. His face tightened. He forced a laugh. Mom, you don't need to worry about that. I'm handling the business. Yes, I said, smiling faintly. But ownership and management are not the same thing. His hand twitched, and I knew I had struck a nerve. The pressure in him grew day by day. He snapped at the kids more often, slammed doors, paced the living room late at night. And when he spoke to me, his words dripped with frustration. One evening, he brought up the nursing home again, this time with a tone that left no room for discussion. Mom, he said sharply, I've already toured a few facilities. One of them has a room available. We should put down a deposit before it's gone. I looked at him steadily. A deposit? With what money? He blinked, caught off guard. What do you mean? I mean, I said calmly, the business accounts are still tied to my name. Any large withdrawal requires my approval. Or did you forget? His face drained of color, then flushed with anger. Why do you have to make everything difficult? Because it's my business, I said, my voice low and steady. And my life. You don't get to decide either without me. For the first time, he didn't argue. He just stood there glaring, before storming out of the house. I knew then that the time was close. He thought he could corner me. He thought he could push me into a home, take the business, and bury the evidence of his mistakes. But I was the one cornering him. That night, I pulled the folder Robert had given me from under my bed. I spread the papers across the blanket, my fingers brushing over each line, each signature, each clause. My name was everywhere. My power was intact. And as I carefully slid the documents back into the envelope, I whispered to myself, He wants me weak. He wants me gone. But I'm still here. And when the time comes, I'll remind him that I built the ground he's standing on. And I can take it away. The pressure in the house became unbearable. David no longer spoke to me like a son to his mother. He spoke like a man addressing a burden he could no longer tolerate. The mask he once wore had slipped completely, and what was left underneath was cold calculation. One morning, I came down to the kitchen and found him sitting at the table with a stack of brochures neatly arranged beside his coffee. Nursing homes, each one promising comfort, care, and peace of mind for families. "Sit down, Mom," he said briskly, gesturing to the chair across from him. I eased myself into the seat, my left hand trembling slightly as I adjusted my cardigan. "We're done dancing around this," he said firmly. "You can't live here anymore." I put down a deposit for a facility, Oakwood Manor. "It's clean, safe, and professional. You'll move in by the end of the month." My heart thudded, but my face remained calm. "You made a deposit?" "Yes." He pushed a paper across the table toward me. "They just need your signature to finalize it." I looked at the document, then back at him. "And what if I refuse?" His jaw tightened. "Then I'll make the decision for you. You can't stay here, Mom. You'll fall again. You'll hurt yourself. You'll ruin everything." Ruin everything. That was what this was really about, not my safety, but his crumbling world. I folded my hands neatly in my lap, my voice soft but firm. "You forget something, David. You can't make any decision for me. You don't hold that power." "I do." His face flushed red. "You're being impossible. Why can't you just admit you can't live alone anymore?" I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "Because I know the truth. This isn't about my health. This is about the business. You think if I'm tucked away in a home, you'll finally be free to do whatever you want with it." His mouth opened, then closed. For a split second, I saw the truth flicker in his eyes before he looked away. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he muttered, his voice shaking. "The loans, the deadlines, it's too much. I need control, Mom. Total control. And I can't have that with you hovering over me." "Hovering?" I whispered, my chest aching. "I gave you everything. I let you run the company. I trusted you. And you call that hovering?" He slammed his fist against the table, the brochures scattering. "You don't get it. You're old, weak, useless. You should be grateful I'm even trying to find a place for you." The words hit like knives, but I didn't flinch. I sat there, my back straight, my eyes steady. "Are those the words you'll teach your children one day?" I asked quietly. "That when their mother grows old, she is useless. That she belongs in a home, discarded like trash." For a moment, he looked ashamed. But the shame quickly curdled into anger. "This conversation is over. You're moving. End of story." He stormed out of the kitchen, the front door slamming behind him. I sat there alone, staring at the scattered brochures on the table. My hands trembled, but not from weakness. From rage. That night, I called Robert again. "It's time," I said simply. He didn't need me to explain. "I'll have everything ready. You'll need to come by the office." Over the next week, with Robert's help, I put the pieces in place. We reviewed every clause of the company documents, every contingency Harold had prepared. We drafted new directives, ensuring that if anything happened to me, the company would pass not to David, but to my grandchildren through a trust. David would be cut out completely. I signed each paper carefully, my hand shaking slightly but my signature strong. As the ink dried, I felt the weight lift from my chest. Robert looked at me, his eyes warm. "You're protecting the future, Margaret. And you're teaching your son a lesson he won't forget." I nodded. He thought my stroke made me weak. But weakness and wisdom are not the same thing. He'll learn that soon enough. When I returned home, David was waiting in the living room. His arms were crossed, his expression dark. "Where were you?" he demanded. "At the bank," I said smoothly. "Sorting some things out." His eyes narrowed. "What things?" "Just a mother making sure her affairs are in order," I replied calmly, easing into my armchair. "You know, in case I ever did end up in one of those homes you're so fond of." His face paled. "You're hiding something." I smiled faintly. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I'm just reminding you that I'm not as powerless as you think." He glared at me, his fists clenched at his sides. For a moment, I thought he might explode again. But instead, he turned sharply and stormed upstairs, muttering under his breath. I sat there in the quiet, my heart steady, my resolve unshakable. The trap was set. He thought he could bully me, discard me, erase me from the life I had built. But he had underestimated the one thing that no stroke could ever take from me, my will. And soon, very soon, he would discover that the empire he believed was his had never belonged to him at all. It belonged to me. The tension between David and me had reached a breaking point. Every conversation was an argument, every glance a battle. He was no longer trying to mask his frustration, he wanted me out, and he wanted it soon. But what he didn't realize was that the harder he pushed, the more evidence he gave me of his true nature. The final straw came at a Sunday family dinner. My grandchildren, Emma and Jack, were there, their bright laughter echoing through the dining room as I set out the silverware. I moved slowly, carefully, my hand trembling slightly as I laid each fork down. "Mom, sit," David said sharply, grabbing the utensils from my hand. "You'll drop them." "I'm fine," I replied, forcing a smile. He sighed loudly, rolling his eyes in front of the children. "You're not fine. Everyone can see that." The room grew quiet. Emma and Jack looked between us, their faces confused. Melissa, my daughter-in-law, shifted uncomfortably. "David, maybe don't." But he was on a roll. "No, let's be honest. Mom can't manage on her own anymore. She's fragile, she's forgetful, she can't even cook dinner without risking a fire. She belongs in a nursing home." The words sliced through me, sharper than any knife. My grandchildren's eyes widened, their mouths falling open. "Daddy," Jack whispered, "don't say that." But David didn't stop. He looked at me with cold determination. "Mom, I'm done pretending. You need professional care. This house isn't safe for you, or for the rest of us. You're moving. That's final." The room was silent, the weight of his words pressing down on all of us. I sat there, my hands folded neatly in my lap, my face calm even as my heart pounded. Then I did something that shocked him. I smiled. "Thank you, David," I said softly, "for finally showing your children who you really are." His face reddened. "Don't twist this. I'm doing what's best for you." "No," I said, my voice steady and sharp. "You're doing what's best for yourself. You want me out of the way so you can run the business unchecked. But here's what you forgot, the business doesn't belong to you. It never has." His mouth opened, but no words came. He was too stunned. Melissa stared at me, her eyes wide. "What do you mean?" I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands. "I mean that your father and I built Walker Logistics with our own hands. I own every inch of it. David has only ever been a manager, an employee. And when I die, the business won't go to him. It will go to Emma and Jack." Gasps filled the room. Emma's fork clattered onto her plate. David's face turned crimson. "You're lying," he spat. I smiled faintly. "Am I?" "Then explain why Robert Jenkins called me last week to finalize the trust. Explain why your loans, your reckless spending, your desperate mistakes, all of it, will soon be exposed." The silence was deafening. David stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. "This is insane. You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, but I do," I said firmly. "And now so does your family." He glared at me, his fists clenched, his face twisted with fury. For a moment, I thought he might strike me. But instead, he stormed out of the room, the door slamming so hard the walls shook. The children looked at me, their eyes wide and fearful. I reached across the table, taking their small hands in mine. "Don't be afraid," I whispered. "The truth always wins." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in my room with the documents Robert had prepared. My hands shook as I touched each page, not from weakness, but from anticipation. Tomorrow, I would go to the office. Tomorrow, I would stand before the employees of Walker Logistics and show them who really held the power. Tomorrow, my son would face the truth he had been running from. I slid the papers back into the folder and placed it gently on my nightstand. Then I whispered into the darkness. "You wanted me gone, David. But it's you who will disappear." And with that, I turned off the light, my heart steady. The storm was coming, and I was ready to unleash it. The morning of my final move dawned gray and heavy, the kind of sky that feels like a warning. I rose slowly, pulling on my cream cardigan over my pale blue dress. My body was still weaker than before the stroke, but my mind? My mind had never been sharper. I tucked the folder of documents into my bag and called Robert. "It's time," I said simply. "Margaret," he replied, his voice steady, "I'll meet you at the office." When David came downstairs, his face was still flushed with anger from the night before. He poured coffee without looking at me. "I'm taking the kids to school. We'll talk later." "There won't be a later," I said calmly. He frowned, confused. "What's that supposed to mean?" I met his gaze evenly. "You'll find out soon enough." By 10 o'clock, I was sitting in the boardroom of Walker Logistics. The employees filed in slowly, whispering among themselves. They were good people, people Harold and I had hired years ago, when the company was nothing but one truck and a dream. Many of them had watched David grow up. And many of them had grown wary of his leadership. David arrived last, storming into the room with his usual arrogance. "What's this about?" he demanded. "I don't have time for games." "This isn't a game," I said, my voice carrying across the table. Robert stood, placing the documents before me. "As legal counsel for Walker Logistics, I want to clarify something today. Margaret Walker is the sole owner of this company. David Walker is an employee, entrusted with management duties, but he has no ownership rights." The room went silent. David's face turned pale. "That's ridiculous. Everyone knows I run this place." "Running it," Robert said firmly, "is not the same as owning it. Every loan, every withdrawal, every risky move you've made, was done under your mother's name. She has full authority to revoke your role at any time." Gasps rippled through the room. The employees turned to me, their eyes wide. I stood slowly, gripping the edge of the table for support, but my voice was steady as stone. "My husband and I built this company. We sacrificed, we fought, we dreamed it into existence. And David, you have taken that gift and nearly destroyed it. You've borrowed recklessly, spent carelessly, and tried to push me aside so you could bury your mistakes." He shook his head violently. "No, that's not true." I pulled out copies of the bank letters, the unpaid invoices, the records of his personal spending. "It is true. And here's the proof. Every lie you told, every dollar you stole from the future of this company, is written here." The employees leaned forward, their whispers turning to outrage. "You can't do this." David shouted. "I'm your son." I looked him straight in the eye. "And I am your mother. A mother who trusted you. A mother who raised you to know better. But you betrayed me. You betrayed this family. And now, you'll face the consequences." I turned to Robert, my voice calm. "Effective immediately, David Walker is suspended from all management duties. He is to have no access to company accounts, no authority over operations. I will appoint a new manager until Emma and Jack are old enough to inherit through the trust." David's mouth fell open. "You can't do this," he shouted again, his face red with rage. "I already have," I said quietly. The room was still, all eyes on me. And in that silence, I felt a strength I hadn't felt in years. "You wanted me in a nursing home," I said, my voice cold but steady. "You wanted me weak, hidden away, forgotten. But you forgot who I am. You forgot that this company carries my name. And you forgot that I am still alive." David stared at me, his chest heaving, his fists clenched. For a moment, I thought he might explode. But then, he turned and stormed out of the boardroom, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. When the echoes faded, I looked around at the employees, some shocked, some smiling faintly with relief. "Walker Logistics will not fall," I said firmly. "Not while I still breathe. And not while I still have family worth fighting for." Later that evening, back at home, I sat in my armchair as Emma and Jack played at my feet. They were too young to understand everything, but one day they would. One day, they'd know that their grandmother fought not just for herself, but for their future. Emma looked up at me, her eyes bright. "Grandma, are you okay?" I smiled, brushing her hair back gently. "I'm better than okay, sweetheart. I'm free." When they went to bed, I sat alone in the quiet house. I thought of Harold, of the years we had poured into building something from nothing. I thought of David, the boy who had once clung to my hand, now lost in his own greed. And I thought of myself, an old woman who had faced a stroke, betrayal, and nearly being cast aside, but who had refused to be broken. I picked up my pen and wrote the last words in my notebook. He wanted me gone. Instead, he is the one who has lost everything. Revenge is not always loud. Sometimes, it's simply reminding them who you are. I closed the book, leaned back in my chair, and let out a breath I had been holding for months. David had tried to put me away. But in the end, it was I who put him away. And justice had never tasted so sweet.